What's up, everybody? What's up, MGTOW? So in this video, I just wanted to talk real quickly about the first all-female spacewalk. But I guess interestingly enough, in 2019, you kind of have to justify your belief in space and justify your belief that the Earth is round, because there's a lot of contention these days about those facts. Now, while it is true that the flat earthers claim that only a few thousand, if that, people have first-person knowledge of whether or not space exists or not and whether or not the planet is round or flat, namely the few astronauts that have supposedly gone to space, it does seem, though, as if the Earth is round and space does exist and there's like stars and galaxies and all that type of stuff out there. But of course, personally, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of said, roundness or spaciness. But then again, a lot of things that we take as knowledge or common knowledge are things that we don't experience firsthand. I mean, of course, you have a priori statements, which are things that can be known just through language without even having to actually experience it yourself. Like, for example, the most classic example of a priori statement is that all bachelors are unmarried. So you don't actually have to know what a bachelor is. All you have to know is what a man is and what marriage is. You don't have to travel around the entire planet and survey every single unmarried man to know that he's a bachelor. So there are a lot of quote-unquote assumptions that are made about things that exist. Like, for example, if you've never been to France, how do you know that the Eiffel Tower is in Paris? You don't know it. You don't know because you have never experienced Paris, France, and looked at the Eiffel Tower. But you could make an assumption based on the fact that there's photographs taken of the Eiffel Tower and people that live in France claim that the Eiffel Tower's there and people that have been to France claim that the Eiffel Tower's there. So you can make a assumption, but you don't actually know for a fact. But then again, you wouldn't know for a fact if the Earth was flat and space doesn't exist. So it kind of becomes a moot point if you're taking it from that perspective of if you only have firsthand knowledge of the thing, that's the only way that you can know. Now, my secondary reason for believing that space exists is due to, I guess you could say, geological evidence or astronomical evidence or astrological evidence, however you want to put it. Because, I mean, when you look at the precession of the equinox and how the planet travels through the constellations and how the moon travels around the planet and the position of the sun during different times of the year does correlate with a round globe type of model more than a flat model. And just the idea of the sun being a spotlight and the moon being some type of fake thing or projection. I mean, personally, I've looked at the moon through a telescope. And I mean, even with the naked eye, you can clearly see, like on half moons and crescent moons, that the moon is round. It's not like a fake model or some other type of thing that people claim that it is. And as far as the distance and composition of the sun, I mean, that it's in question, but I would fathom to guess that the sun is not like 20,000 miles above the Earth and just kind of rotating around on some type of track. Now, when people do the laser tests across what's supposedly flat land, that too is questionable because the surface of the Earth is not flat. There's no part of the Earth that's completely flat. Even deserts and seabeds and things like that, they're not completely flat. So it'd be hard to determine, what the actual curvature drop-off rate is in a place like that, because you might be standing on one side of a lake and it might be slightly higher or lower than the other side of the lake, even though the lake itself technically is flat. Now, when it comes to the actual dimensions and the curvature of the Earth, I mean, it's an interesting question, because I'm sure that the scientists are just kind of estimating what the ratio of drop off is to where you can't see over the edge anymore. Because, I mean, technically nobody's ever walked around the entire planet with like a tape measure and measured the exact, circumference of the planet with a tape measure. And I'm sure it's probably not perfectly round. It might be more of a oval or egg shaped type of thing than we realize. And then again, with different elevations and mountains and things like that, it'd be very hard to precisely down to the decimal point determine the exact circumference of the Earth to do those measurements of the drop off, because it could be different in different places. And I mean, who knows? Like I said, nobody's ever walked around the Earth and one guy's holding the tape measure and then another guy walks around the Earth and sticks it next to the other end and measures it. It's just kind of ridiculous to think that would happen. So I guess my last point would be that technically, if the Earth was completely flat, like it was a flat plane, then I mean, technically, you should be able to see halfway across the Atlantic Ocean if you're facing east and you're on top of the Empire State Building with a telescope. Because yes, I'm aware of the optical illusion of the vanishing line, and that's why it makes boats look as though they're disappearing from the bottom up, and that is an optical illusion. But telescopes don't have the same optical illusions as, a fancy zoom camera, and especially a digital camera. And I would think that if you were looking out east from the Empire State Building onto the Atlantic Ocean with a high-powered telescope that you can see planets with, that you should easily be able to see boats like in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That's just not how it works. So, saying all that, I do believe that NASA does participate in some deceptive practices. I mean, it is proven that the pictures that they take from space are colorized and photoshopped in certain ways. And while they're, not saying that they're creating the images, there's definitely some photoshopping and colorization going on. And I mean, that's publicly admitted by NASA. But to me, I feel like the main kind of public face of NASA and of the space station and all that stuff is a publicity stunt in many ways. And most notably, it's there to basically, promote people to pay taxes towards NASA. Because I think that the average person, when they wonder what NASA is doing for them with their tax money, it's very little, because most people are never going to leave the planet unless you're a super genius and near Olympic level athlete. You're not leaving the planet. So the question arises is, who gets to leave the planet, and why are we paying tax money for them to get to leave the planet when we're obviously not going to be able to do it? So they use these kind of promotional things to kind of entice people into thinking that NASA is beneficial to everybody, and what NASA developed besides Tang and, all these other little things, it's kind of the same claim that the military makes. Like, oh, well, if there wasn't war, we would have never had the cell phone or the synthesizer or all these other things. Like, nobody would have ever developed anything if there wasn't for wars. Which is just kind of it's a bold claim, and it's probably not 100% factually true. So to me, we can kind of see a similar trend with this all-female spacewalk thing, because there's nothing actually remarkable about the all-female spacewalk. apparently female astronauts have been doing spacewalks for at least 35 years. So it's not like it's the first woman to in space. It's not the first woman to do a spacewalk. It's just basically the first time that two women have done a spacewalk instead of a man and a woman. And to me, it's kind of emblematic of what is going on in society as a whole, where feminism reached equality 35 years ago when they had the first female to do a spacewalk. Now that's pretty something to take note of. You know, spacewalks are dangerous and difficult, and makes sense that that would be something to be remarked upon. But now it's just kind of going into the point where, you know, it's not about equality. Now it's about female domination. And even during the presentation, which I'll link below, you can see that they had female presenters and it was all female spacewalk. And they were just kind of trying to show, oh, well, women can do it too. And women can do it just as good as men, which I'm not sure of because, you know, spacewalks take a lot of endurance and strength and concentration. So I'm sure the best male astronauts could probably do a longer, more complicated spacewalk than the female astronauts. But still, that's kind of besides the point. I think it's more just showing how, you know, society it wants to applaud, you know, no longer the equality of a man and a woman doing the spacewalk together, because before it was all men, but now it's all female. It's no, we don't need men to do the spacewalk anymore. We don't need men in space anymore. The women can do it just fine on their own. And again, it's a publicity stunt because probably, you know, more women are advancing in careers and social life, and they're going to be paying taxes to NASA now. So now NASA has to convince women that, oh yeah, NASA's working for you. We're going to be testing hair gel in space, and we're going to be testing makeup in space now instead of growing potatoes and lab rats and all that type of stuff. So it's just kind of an interesting phenomenon to see that, I mean, it's not really very big in the news, but the fact that they're trying to hype this up as something that's remarkable when in actuality, women have been in space and doing spacewalks for at least 35 years. And now it's about a female dominant spacewalk where it's only females and it's only female announcers and there's no men involved in it at all, which is, you know, very concordant with social attitudes towards what women should be doing anyway. That it should just be just women. We don't need men. We don't need men to go into space anymore. We don't need men to do anything. But of course, when you're watching the video, you could see that in the actual ground control station, the majority of the people that were there were men doing all the analytics and checking the engineering and, you know, looking at the logistical side of things. They couldn't get an all-female crew to do that. But the all-female spacewalk is still supposed to be this big feat of, you know, female ingenuity, or I don't know what it's supposed to be. But it seems like it's a bit overblown. And the fact is that it's just kind of reflecting the social attitudes towards feminism, towards women, towards men in general. Now, of course, we haven't gone to the moon in quite some time, and that would be interesting to see, you know, a female on the moon, something like that. I think that would be remarkable. But just this all-female spacewalk thing, I think it's really a publicity stunt, and it's also reflective of social attitudes towards where women should be. Women should be doing things on their own without men. It should just be a big lesbian spacewalk, and everybody should be applauding that, when in actuality, nothing really has gone on. Because, like I said, the first woman to do a spacewalk was over 35 years ago. And women haven't gone to the moon yet, so this is kind of like a midway point, maybe, something like that. I don't know. But in any case, it's just something interesting to think about, and just kind of showing the attitudes towards feminism and towards men, because now men are excluded from spacewalks. Well, so That's really all I had to say about that. Have a good day and go MGTOW.